All right. Hello, my name is Donna Anthony, and welcome to the Point Blank podcast. This is our very first episode. A little bit about me. I am born and raised in Alaska. I have 4 generations of family here. I am a retired veteran of law enforcement here in the state of Alaska, and I'm also the current owner of Point Blank Firearms and Self-Defense Training. We have staff in the Valley, Anchorage, and in Homer. The reason why I started this podcast is try to get some information out to our fellow Alaskans in reference to understanding politics and also keeping up on our Second Amendment rights here in Alaska. It's about a 30-minute episode, and today our first guest speaker will be Mike Showers. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. And how you doing there in Juneau?
Oh, it's Juneau.
I know you flew late last night, and I know you're pretty tired. You just got there, right?
I did. Yeah, we got in late last night. Plane was late, standard act, whatever. But yeah, back in the clown show area.
Yeah. Did you have a good Mother's Day with everybody?
Yeah, it was good. I had to do some work, come home, but I did get to spend Sunday with Michelle and do a little bit of Mother's Day with her and the kids. That was nice.
Good. Well, if you don't mind, we'll go 30 minutes into a couple questions. It's point blank, right to the point. You good with that?
Bring it.
All right, I've got some questions here for you. First, I want to talk about SB 39. Are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay. It started out as a ballot chain custody bill 3 years ago before election law was cool, right? What prompted you to look at these issues?
So we started, if you remember, Donna, in 2016, we had, and people say don't politicize it, but look, it's politics. It's freaking elections. Of course, it's going to be politicized. So, in 2016, a whole section of the country was very upset about the results. And, it was not my president, stolen election fraud, collusion, blah, 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 whatever. So in 2018, we were thinking about, different bills, and we're like, this election is nuts. People were still, just very vocal and upset, et cetera. So we said, well, let's just take a look at it. So we started looking at Alaska election law, and nobody else was talking about or doing anything. So once we did, we started going, wow, it seems like our voter rolls are pretty out of date. We probably fixed that. And we said, we're doing a lot of mail out ballots, and we started looking at best practices, reading studies from Harvard, Yale, and some U.S. government, data from the federal government. And it was like, chain of custody, that's a big deal, authenticating people. And then all of the data breaches we were seeing with cyber warfare, cyber attacks, going, maybe we could probably be better. So we started looking at our record. It wasn't very good. So it became one of those things like, man, there's some significant issues here. There's this myth out there that we did this because of the 2020 election. Wrong. We've been doing this for years. It was because, of Trump's election. Like, wrong. Could care less, because we started this when it was the left that was upset. And so we started figuring out, well, we need to file a bill and see if we can clean some of these things up. And then in 2020, it got even worse, because now the other side of the country is upset because, stolen election fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So the whole spectrum of the country seems to be kind of upset or not trusting the election results. And so the biggest thing, Donna, we started at going, look at these areas that we can do better. We've added some things to the bill. This last election cycle has made it even, I think, more important, because so many people seem to have lost faith. And that's the bottom line. It was 3 big things. It was cleaning up our voter rolls. It was making sure that we had protecting the data, because we're doing a terrible job, and we were looking at chain of custody, which the federal government itself that says we should be doing chain of custody. And that was kind of the impetus for it all, but was to figure out a way to restore faith, because we've always had, contentious elections in our country. We've always had elections where people don't like the results and they're mad. But I've never really seen in our history a time where we didn't trust the election results and just accept them, even though we don't like them. This is dangerous. And so that 3 minutes there is, in a nutshell, why we ended up doing what we're doing, even with the heat we're taking for it.
So my understanding, we've had probably 2 election hacks in Alaska. Is that correct? Do you know anything?
There's been more, yes, but the big ones, there was one in 2019 with about 94,000 Alaskans data. That was, some of it was compromised. And then last year, of course, in early October, we had another data breach, which had 113,000 Alaskans data, which was about a month, 5 weeks or so before the general election. They knew about it a week before. Well, they knew for a while. They were trying to fix it. They told the lieutenant governor a week before. They never said anything. So the next thing you have is an election that takes place knowing that we had, at that point, almost a third of the Alaskans that voted, their data was breached.
Yep.
And it was kind of a big deal, and they didn't tell anybody. Then they certified the election a month after and then told us we had a data breach. And I'm kind of going, that's probably not the way we want to do business. But yeah, we've had several, and the courts system was hacked last week and is still down, not functioning right. So we have a problem, because that's the real world. So we're all digital, our information's there. It's hard for the state with its resources to fight China and Russia and Iran. Those are nation states, and they're hacking us every day, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. It's a big problem.
So do we know that's where the election hacking is coming from other countries? Do we know for Alaska?
I have heard through sources that Iran is the one that hacked us last year, state actor. I don't know about this latest one and the previous one, because that's just data that was flowing through our work on this election reform. We were getting information from folks where that one came from. But I think a lot of this is nation state, or at least sponsored by nation states because of the resources. But you also, Donna, let's be honest, you could have the 16-year-old kid sitting in his basement that's a genius hacker out there doing this too. It happens all the time. But the point is we have cyber warfare going on every day, whether it's a nation state or a kid in his mom's basement. It's the real world we live in. And we're not doing a great job of securing our data. And that's a state problem. That's not just elections or division of elections. That's everybody.
So knowing that we have these issues and it's happened before, what's the state doing about that? Do you know?
Not a lot, because it requires money and resources, and it's one of the efforts we have that everybody's so upset. It's funny as we've changed our bill a little bit the last 3.5 months. The first it was, it's voter suppression. I don't know if you remember this. I was telling you, no, I'm a white supremacist. I'm a racist because I'm just trying to do. No, it's going to keep people. Okay, right. And you see why I'm just scoffing. It's like, well, where were you 3 years ago? We started this. Nobody on the left said a thing because they were still upset about the election. Now their guy gets it also. They're like, everything's fine. I'm like, it's very political.
Well, let me back up on this. I mean, okay, so your career, you're retired military, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you for your service. Now, you were a pilot before, is that correct?
I was.
Okay, and you're a pilot still currently with another airline company? You probably make more money doing that than you do at Juneau, right?
Oh, I make many times more as a pilot for FedEx than I do in this silly job.
So why do you do this job? I'm just curious.
Well, it's a good question, Donna, and I'll do my best to answer.
Okay.
The reality is I don't enjoy the job. It has taken a lot of time away from my family after 24 years in the military. I'll have 30 years after 5 years of this at this point or so. And a lot of time for my family, a lot of time for my kids and my grandkids. It's costing us a lot of money. It's hurting me at my other job, seniority, vacation, other things, because I burn all my vacation time to come here. So I don't have as much time away from that job. These are, I'm 53 and these are the high earning years of my life. And so I'm losing all that for this. And it's not, it's kind of like you look at it, where's the upside, right? Michelle and I have talked and struggled with this often because it's a struggle for her too. We don't see each other a lot and we're missing each other. But at the end of the day, Donna, the reason I was willing to step into the gap for at least a little while is it's an important job. We give an immense amount of power to elected officials over our lives and controlling, what we get to do and think and say and all of that. And there's a lot of these things that have been happening, like you're working on things with red flag laws and other things, Second Amendment rights, state rights, et cetera. It can be dangerous. And so seeing all the changes happening, Michelle and I were concerned and like, well, we're here for a reason. Let's do our best, step in the gap, try to make a difference for a while. We'll see where it goes. But if people think I'm doing this because I'm gaining money, I show you my bank account. You think I'm having a great time? Oh, let me show you that, because I'm not. It's just what it is.
Yeah, and thank you so much. One, for your service for the military, and for your service, what you're doing now, because it's a tough person to go into Juneau. It looks like it's a battlefield all by itself. So I just wanted to touch base on that, and I'll continue with my list of questions. But thank you again. So my next question I have is, I love this one, the critics, right? So critics of the bill have labeled a voter suppression bill. They've labeled this a voter suppression bill. So what's your response to that this is a voter suppression bill?
Well, the first thing is they have to challenge, I give them the challenge, which I haven't heard a great answer on how it suppresses the votes. And so their opinion is anything that's not a Democrat bill that would not just free up voting for anybody, anytime, anywhere, without ever having to prove who you are or anything else, is just the way it ought to be, because that's your right. So the reality, Donna, is not a voter suppression bill. People haven't been able to show me how it's going to suppress the votes. Areas where we thought it might make things harder or more complicated, we just took out of the bill when we had debates with other groups, with activists, with other legislators. So we've worked really hard to try to get it to a place where, look, you can't even make an accusation that it's voter suppression. There's this idea out there still that people will think that, well, you shouldn't have to prove who you are to vote. But you have to prove who you are to get money out of your own checking account at the bank, to buy alcohol or cigarettes,
travel,
to go to an R-rated movie. So there's so many things every day, all day long, where we have to prove who we are to be able to conduct business. And yet one of the most sacred rights we have, one of the most important things we do, because like we said, there's so much power we hand to elected officials over our lives, and making treaties with other countries and going to war. I mean, so many things that we do, and yet we don't want to prove who those people are when they vote, the people that are going to execute all those policies and spend trillions of dollars. I mean, come on, folks. So it's not voter suppression. Donna, I know a lot of these could be really long answers. I'm so, passionate and involved in this, but it's not a voter suppression bill. And I highlighted the three areas that have nothing to do with, making it harder for people to vote. It's protecting our data. It's having a chain of custody. All these ballots we're mailing out, so we know who gets them, where they go when they come back, right? And then cleaning up our voter rolls. We show right off the data, Donna, right off the data, DOE's own data. There's about 108,000 more people registered to vote in the state than can be eligible. And it's a tiny state. Don't tell me we can't clean our rolls up when I'm getting pictures of ballots being sent to people that have been gone for 2, 3, 4, 5 years from the state, still getting ballots from elections in Alaska. And one guy he got 1,000, a data set of 1,000 for the municipal election this about 2 weeks ago, just on his own. And he came back and he went through and he said 200 of the 1,000 are registered, living in and registered to vote in another state. They're still registered to vote in Alaska, 20%. And if you apply that statewide, how could
I don't understand this?
They tell me it's all fine, nothing to see here. The reality is it's not fine, which means we're sending ballots to all of these people. We're creating errors. We're creating the potential for fraud. They could accidentally do them both and find themselves in trouble. And I mean, just the things, it's not clean, not even remotely clean.
Now, my understanding is, and this is why we're doing this for knowledge for all of our listeners, who's in charge of the elections?
Lieutenant Governor.
And he has a role, and what's he doing about this? I'm just asking, what's he doing? What is he doing about this? I don't put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I mean, look, I'll call a spade. I'm fine with it. Kevin's a super nice guy. There's a lot of folks down here in Juneau in the political world that if they were your neighbor, you go, oh, they're nice folks, whatever. But as long as you don't talk politics, if you start talking politics, then it gets real wonky and people are upset. And, there's ideology and backstabbing and all kinds of crazy stuff takes place. So when you get to the political world, it's very different. But Kevin Meyer, Lieutenant Governor Meyer, and the Gail Phenomii, who's the Division of Election Director, it's been a challenge to get information in a lot of ways. And I am not particularly happy with the responses we've gotten from, at times, the administration or the Division of Elections. I feel, and I could be wrong, but I'm telling you, my feeling, same of staff, is that we're not getting all the answers to our questions. In other words, it's almost like they're trying to a little bit of smoke and mirrors. We have noticed since November and all the questions we've been asking, which we've gotten harder questions asked as we've moved along, that there was, they told us on the record, there were and I'll give you an example, there were 600,000 registered voters in Alaska. Well, how can there be 600,000 registered voters, people eligible to vote, when 128,000 are kids under 18? So that gets you at 600,000. What about the 14,500 felons that can't vote? What about the 85,000 non-citizens? And they go, we'll get back to you. And they got back to us, right? We've noticed that there's been about 12,000 people purged off the rolls in the last couple months as citizens and ourselves have been asking for the records, and the number has been changing. And other citizens, like this other guy I just explained a moment ago, and a group up in Wasilla is working on it. None of the numbers match up from various sources from Division of Elections. So we got problems. And I'm not here contending that there's been massive fraud. We never even started the effort on fraud. It wasn't even something we looked at up front. People have these myths about this bill. They say like it's voter suppression and it's all these different things they talk about, and it's going to keep people from voting, and it's going to take away local elections, and it's not going to let people help grandma to get her ballot. No, wrong on every one of those.
I would think any party would want election integrity for any party, right?
You would think that this would be partisan. That's right. But it's
Right.
not. And the counter bill that's in the House, there's a House Bill 66. And of course, almost everybody that testifies in that opposes the bill, they're all left. They are. I mean, we looked up who most of them are, and based on their comments, they're leftists, whatever. And that's fine. I don't care. People have a right to be who they are. But, people on the right side of the political spectrum support this and have not opposed it. People on the left side have been violently opposed to it. I'm like, well, why? Explain it. Well, because it does this. I'm like, no, it doesn't. And we tell people all the time, like, well, I'm sure have you read the bill? Well, no, but I've heard that it's really bad and that it suppresses the vote. Okay, why don't you read the bill and ask questions is one of the things, right? And so the bill in the House is almost the polar opposite of our bill. It's got things like same day registration. best practices in other places down there said, no, you don't register same day because it allows, like what happened in Georgia recently
Yes.
over the US Senate elections. There were Democrats out there telling people to move to Georgia to vote in it to swing a state.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. That's not policy. That's not right. That's nothing but a power play. And so things like same day voting, people come in and say, well, yeah, if you can't prove who you are, we're still going to give you a ballot. What? No. So
Right.
they want to go to mail out everywhere. When our voter rolls are that outdated and we're sending ballots, we can't do that. I mean, it's not a best practice. So, and I'm not saying it's all bad, but you know, we looked at things done like ballot curing. It was something the left desperately wants because they want to mail ballots to everybody with no restrictions, everybody. Well, ballot curing says, like Anchorage mails out its ballots right to everybody, but they use the state data. If the state data is not right, then Anchorage's data is not right either.
That's already
right?
a problem right there. I know, just right there alone, we already have a
Correct,
problem.
right? So, but ballot curing is not necessarily a bad thing because it means that every ballot that's sent in, if it was missing a mark, a signature, a piece of information, it was torn, we could get with people in time to let them cure it to still have their ballot count. I'm okay with that because you want everybody's ballot to count. I mean, ultimately, none of us want anybody to be suppressed with their vote. If you're eligible to vote, you have a right to vote. You should be able to vote. You just got to prove who you are, right? That's pretty much it.
I don't think that's very difficult.
Yeah, that's the point.
All right, I got some more questions here for you. If you're good with that, I know you got to go. All right.
No, I'm good. I'm good on time because I took care of all that PFD stuff this morning already.
Oh, good. All right. So here's my next one. There's a provision about the courts not having authority to legislate from the bench. A judge struck verification signatures from absentee ballots. Just on that alone, as a police officer, that just says it's opening up for possible fraud. What's up with that?
It was one of the only cross checks we had. And, you know, I've heard people say things that's silly in public testimony as, well, why should we even have a witness signature anyways? Because it's still just, it doesn't really, you know, prevent fraud at all. You know, and it really doesn't matter. We shouldn't even have to have witness signatures on the ballot. Somebody said that, and one or two people said that in testimony. Like,
that's crazy.
You want no cross checks on voting for all the things, the power you give to politicians? It's just it's mind boggling to listen to it. So yes, a judge on her own by herself struck down the witness signature provision because of COVID. I'm not sure what that really had to do with it. And so what that judge essentially did was rewrote election law. Because she wrote it and said, no, this is the election law, which by the Constitution says that the legislature's purview writes the law.
Right.
Judges don't write the law. Judges can determine whether a law is constitutional or not. So if what the judge said was it was not constitutional to have a witness signatures, then it should be struck down at all times. What the judge says, well, because of COVID, we're going to temporarily halt this, and that is writing election law. Right. That is not striking it down because it's unconstitutional. That's a judge's opinion. Their perceived bias that because of COVID, we're going to let you change the law for a little while. That's writing law. That's what she did. That's unconstitutional.
It's just shocking. Yeah. All right. So
we put that back in, which is going to be controversial because what we said was it's the legislature's purview to write law and ours only. Judges can't write election law. And people go, that's going to be unconstitutional because you're saying you can't, you know, the judges can't. I said, I'm not saying judges can't look at it and judge constitutionality. I'm saying judges can't write or rewrite election law. One person getting to do that's ridiculous. That whole law was vetted by 60 legislators and a governor to make this law, and one judge goes in on their own accord and just strikes it down because they don't like it during a pandemic. And that's ridiculous. Anyways, that's what it says.
Well, I'm glad you're looking at that. That just, when I saw that kind of shocked me. So I'm glad you kind of explained what's going on that. And hopefully educate some of our listeners on what's really happening and how that occurred, right? Because of COVID.
Sure, yeah.
Right. And hopefully we can get that fixed. Here's another one with the critics. Critics will cite that there are no widespread fraud. I love hearing this, right? And that you're trying to fix a non-problem. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that one?
We have a solution in search of a problem and there's no fraud whatsoever. Everything's perfect. I'm like, really? So you know that, right? Absolutely not. What about Gabby Ledoux? 16 people in the same trailer voting. What about the 8 or 9 cases I've heard that are working through the law enforcement system right now? So there is fraud. And we have never said, Donna, and I got to be clear again, as I told you, we've never said there's massive fraud. Could be. I don't know if there is law enforcement. The data we got from all these people saying they got ballots they didn't request in the state and all the multiple ballots, we turned all that data to law enforcement. They're doing whatever they do. I think without a doubt, we had fraud, whether or not it's systemic, whether or not it's, thousands or tens, I don't know. And I don't think so. but where there's definitely fraud. So people always say there's no fraud. And let me ask them, I asked this one question, they don't have an answer. I said, so we had 113,000 Alaskans data breach, correct? Yes. So what was in that? I don't know. Well, I can tell you, it was the last four of your social, your driver's license number, your address, your name, birth date. I think there's 5 or 6 pieces of information, everything you need to request a ballot. So does the Division of Elections cross-check? How do they cross-check? They accept the ballots when they come back prima facie. You can order a ballot online and they'll send an email link to your house. You print it out, you can fill it out and send it back. With 113,000 Alaskans data floating around, we've got this on the record talking to them. All that somebody would have to do is go get who has voted in the last X number of elections, and anybody that didn't vote, especially if you focus on undeclared and nonpartisans, which make up the majority of the state, all somebody had to do with that information, he goes, here, I have everything to vote for somebody. All I got to do is look at who hasn't voted in the last number of years, because nobody's going to check or cross-check or have any idea. Request the ballots with a fake email address, send those suckers in. They could have sent in 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Here's the point, Donna. I'm not saying they did. I'm saying we don't know if they did, and nobody would know because the state's not sending letters to ask them if they voted or not. So we don't have a clue what kind of fraud there is, and we don't even cross-check. We don't even check witness signatures that we don't need anymore, or the actual signatures. The state doesn't forensically check it. So we have virtually no cross-check on ballots coming back. We accept them as the division has told us on the record multiple times, prima facie. If there's not something red flag like 16 from the same address, they simply don't look at it. We assume all is well, and people tell me there's nothing to see here.
It just blows my mind. Being in law enforcement, I'm just sitting here, I'm just like, I don't even know what to say. Who's investigating this? Why are we not doing a full audit? It just shocks me with the information you're providing. I just can't believe our state is in this position. So
I don't know. I don't know.
It's unbelievable, Mike. I can't believe this.
It makes you shake your head that it seems like people just think there's nothing to see here. And I'm not saying there is, but we also have no idea of knowing whether or not we even should, because we just don't check.
Well, and I've also talked to a couple people that are actually looking into this, and they've found people who have actually been deceased and showed that they voted. Have you heard the same thing?
Yes, we have. We've had also on the data list we're looking at that we've had people, for example, that have their residences in Anchorage, and yet they voted in the Mat-Su borough. People in the Mat-Su borough that have a Mat-Su borough address that voted in Anchorage. We have people that showed absentee ballots and or in person that registered. Their original registration date was the 3rd of November. You're not supposed to be allowed to register and vote within 30 days of the election. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of people we show on the list that did that. So the anomalies are real and strong, but everybody keeps telling me there's nothing to see here. And, and you go, well, it wasn't, there's the ultimate fallback I hear from people. Well, even if there was some fraud or somebody saying there wasn't enough to swing the election. I'm like, really? Lance Pruitt, 11 votes, one district, a couple others within 100, 150.
That's too close. Yeah.
Don't tell me that, 1,000 or a couple thousand that, if these irregularities and people doing weird stuff, voting in the wrong district, whatever, could not have swung an election. Baloney.
Well, I'm also hearing that people got the copies of right after the election of each district, and some have over 100% showing a voter. So
I believe we're at 130% this last time of, register versus eligible voters. And the average is something like 78%, 80%. We got this off the world. There's a world site that does all the tracking on elections around the world, et cetera. And we are way over. I mean, I'm talking way, way over. Like I said, 100,000 people on the rolls probably shouldn't be based on the data we have alone. And then the amount of votes we have and how it works out with far more, as far as what votes on a percentage, it's something like 130,000 or so 130%. And we're always over 100%. And the average is much less than that. You can have a spike now and then. Yeah. You look at all the other states, they're 78, 80%, whatever it is. We're always over 100. You're going, how in the world is that possible? We just,
this is unbelievable. It's shocking. It's just shocking.
Nobody's really paying attention, Dot, as the bottom line. We've been digging into things. It's like that when you start peeling back the layers of the onion, you're starting to go, whoa. Every time you peel another layer back, you find something. You're like, what in the heck? And just looking at the statutes, they haven't been looked at in decades. And we don't have best practices for how to do mail out voting. Only 2 states did, and we're doing that too. And it's a monstrous task to clean this up. And people, I think what would be really fascinating to me, Donna, is if next year all of a sudden everything swung back to the right, and maybe we got more votes, let's just say a few more conservatives or Republicans win, and we take back the House and the Senate. Let's say in 2 years, a couple of years, the president goes back to a Republican. You know what I'm going to see? You want to take a guess?
Go for it.
all these people out there, there's nothing to see here. This is broken. This is
It's
fraud. We need to look at the system. It was fraud. You
right.
watch. It's politics.
I know. That's why it has to be fixed now for everybody. Bottom line, it's just shock. All right, I got some more questions for you. You ready? Because
bring it.
I'm just trying to zip my mouth on what I want to say on this. But all right. So you introduced a bill that is a new approach on how judges are selected in Alaska. What's the current process and how is that flawed?
So in the federal, I'll give real quick on this one, or try to anyways. It never ends up going that fast. The federal government, the president makes the selections, the suggestions, the Senate will basically vet them and approve them, right, or not. And what we have across the country, there's two primary methods. One is called the merit-based plan or the Missouri plan. And what that is essentially they have like a judicial council type of a setup of some form. And it's kind of what we do in Alaska. It's called a judicial council. And they vet and pick the candidates, and then those make it through that process. And the governor gets to pick from those, and that's it. And then you have like elected, another type system, which would be like elected judges, right? That's kind of two primary methods, if you will. Well, Alaska uses this kind of quasi Missouri plan. But here's the problem. One of the primary problems with it, when you read right out of the Constitution, it says that the Judicial Council will select the superior and the Supreme Court judges. Everything else shall be prescribed by law. When they say that, that means the legislature is prescribing it. So for the appellate courts, the district courts, the magistrates, the legislature should be picking those judges, not the Judicial Council. Now, here's the biggest problem. When you go to the legislature, right, 60 people from around the state, they have to run, they have to be vetted. People get to vote on those people and put them in the office. They're held accountable by their vote, right? Same thing with the governor. When it comes to 1/3 of our governmental structure, and in some ways the most powerful, we just talked about a judge striking down election law by herself.
The example, yes.
The people do not have a vote in that process because the Alaska Bar Association, 2,400 active lawyers in Alaska, are the ones that control that process, and they pick who sits on our judiciary. Judges are never elected in this state. They are appointed by a governor who only gets two choices, from that judicial council. And let's take this a little deeper. The judicial council is made up of 3 lawyers from the Alaska Bar Association, 3 civilians who are appointed by the governor but get vetted by the legislature with an up or down vote. And that 7th person that controls it is a tie-breaking vote. Well, guess who that is? Another lawyer, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. So since the beginning, Alaska has had a system where the Alaska Bar Association, a trade association, lawyers get to pick from amongst themselves, ultimately, who's going to sit on and control the bench. Think about how corrupt that system can be and how much it would be if legislators got to get together every 2 years and say, we're going to pick from amongst ourselves who the next legislators are going to be. That would be
scary. That would be scary.
That's how we do it. So what we said is that's not the best way, in our opinion, to do this. We can't touch the Supreme Court and the Superior Courts because the Constitution change is a big deal and it's hard. But what we can do is the legislature can take back its authority to have input into who's going to sit on those lower courts and make sure that they're cross-checked as far as being constitutionalists and other things. So that's what the bill does. This bill says, look, we're going to allow the Judicial Council, which is that council, to pick 4 people. We're going to allow the governor to pick 2 people. So we'll have a bigger pool of people to choose from. The Judicial Council will still vet them for their background and legal experience, et cetera. And then when the governor picks from one of those 6 different people, that person, if it's one of the lower court picks, has to go through the legislature for an up and down vote. So if it's a wacko, if it's a too far left, too far right, we'll have a balance in that because the person won't make the process. And it's not perfect, and it's not elected judges that the people are directly accountable to, but at least it's something where the voice of the people has more input into the process because their legislators now get to look at that person to decide whether they're good or not. And a lot of states do a system like that, and up to and including electing them. And that's just a bridge too far right now. But Donna, you look at the results and people ask what it is and you go, think what you want. And they try to say how great they are. And judges are unbiased and they're all these different things. Well, you know what? The Supreme Court itself directed the court liaison to oppose my bill. So if they're not political, then how come they're jumping in the middle of politics and she's running around the building telling people why they don't want to pass this bill? Because it takes away some of their kingdom. It takes away part of their empire. They lose control of the process. And that's not the way this should work. We have judges and we have a council that is unelected and unaccountable. We have judges that are unelected in their own way unaccountable, and they only get retention votes later on, many years down the road. That's all you ever get to do, right? So it's not a great process. It needs to be better.
You're giving me a lot of depressing news here. This is just mind-blowing.
Nobody looks at it. No, it's been hidden for so long, Donna. Nobody's bothered to dig up some of these things, and we are. And there's a lot of legislators, and I'm not throwing a spear at them, but a lot of legislators take up things like naming bridges and, saving kittens out of trees, with the fire department. I don't know. Easy
I know,
bills,
yeah.
not contentious.
And then vote for me. I made a bridge in my name, and I
Yeah,
said, please vote for me. Right?
And I'm not here to do things like that. I'm here to look at where we have systemic problems or structural things we can change that make the state better, including the budget, the PFD, and other things. People, you shouldn't be working on these bills, Mike. You should be working on important stuff. I'm like, you think I can't multitask? I've been doing that my whole life. I'm working on about 12 different things, and they're important things. And that's why it's so contentious, Donna, because I'm working on things that people don't want me touching their empire. The left, this group or that group doesn't want me touching election reform because they think it's going great right now. They don't want the whole judiciary. I'm fighting the whole judiciary, including the Supreme Court, because they don't want me touching their empire. Right. These are not easy things. I'm taking them on because they need to be done, not because they're easy or making my life easier. They're making my life miserable right now. But you know what? I'm not gonna take up a bill named Bridge. I'm gonna do something that's important if I'm here, or I'm wasting my time.
Well, thank you for bringing the awareness to everybody. It's just mind-blowing, but I think Alaskans need to know kind of what's going on in Juneau, what's been happening, and how do we make the corrections. I have just a couple more questions. I know you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine.
Good. All right. What's the difference with your approach this year versus the past attempts in changing the judicial council process?
So in past years, if you go back in history, a number of legislators have tried to change, including like a Senate president like Pete Kelly and John Coghill, who people know because his dad was, lieutenant governor. There's the Coghill name, been up here a long time. They tried to change in the Constitution the makeup of the Judicial Council, how those people were put onto the council, or different makeup changes. And remember, that requires a constitutional change. So in this body, we can't seem to get much done, right?
Yeah, no.
It moves slow. And that's often a good thing. We don't want, dictatorship is the most efficient form of government. One person just tells everybody what they got to do, and that's really efficient. But, unless they're a benign dictator, it doesn't tend to go real well for the people, right? So you got bad dictator with all kinds of power, things are pretty bad. So we move slow sometimes, and that's not always bad, but it can be frustrating. So they tried to change the Constitution, but out of 60 legislators in each body, 20 senators, 40 House reps, you have to get 14 senators and 27 House members to vote for a constitutional change. A normal bill is only 11 or 21. That's a lower bar, easier to get a bill passed. The constitutional changes, really, really hard. So even people like that were never able to get that done. I tried the first 2 years because Coghill said, well, Mike, maybe you can take it up. And so I tried that constitutional change on the Judicial Council. I got one hearing as far as I got it, right? It's like, okay, this is going to be tough. So last year, Scott and I were looking, one of my staffers were looking at the statutes and going, is there another way to solve this, to make it better, to get more people? Because that's ultimately what it's about, is just more input from the people, right? It's our government, input, right? That's ultimately what it was about. I was horrified that when I started learning about the Missouri plan, that, a trade association, the Alaska Bar Association, can essentially pick, who's going to run 1/3 of the government. I'm like, that's just wrong. So we started looking, and it was one of those eureka moments, Donna, where you go, oh, I could have had a V8. You read it and you go right there in the Constitution. It says that the Supreme Court and the Superior Courts will be picked by the Judicial Council. All other courts will be prescribed by law. We're like, oh, that's us. What are we doing? How come the legislature hasn't been doing this for, since 1959? And it's just, we abrogated that. We let the courts take it, and they did it. And you're going, no, we need to do better than that. And unfortunately, people, when they say it's no politics, like I was explaining, there's all kinds of politics in the court getting involved, and Bolger and his stuff with the governor. I mean, there's lots of politics. I'm sorry, you're a human. It's almost impossible to extract yourself from that. And so we looked at it and what the makeup of the bar was, and it's about 2/3 Democrats, 1/3 Republican. Of course, there's some independents and all that in there. I go, what that shows me is the political leanings are are leftist in our court system. And that's not to say they couldn't be a good judge if they're a Democrat, Republican, but I'm not a fool and I'm not naive. If you have an organization that's made up of all Republicans mostly, or all Democrat, whatever it is, it's going to lean in those directions politically. And if we have a bar association that's made up of mostly liberal Democrats, your bar and thence your courts are going to start leaning left. And I think most people would argue they have when we look at things.
I think it has. I've been law enforcement. It has. It's changed so much. You've seen it. It's changed.
So we could do better. Yeah. So we can do better by, hopefully, with the legislature being involved and having an up or down vote on those lower courts is a point. And I don't care about Democrat, Republican, or liberal, conservative. What I care about is constitutionalist. I want to see constitutionalist judges that do their job. They interpret the Constitution against the law, period. They don't make the law. They don't bring their personal stuff into it. And I think we can do better with that. And I've talked to many lawyers and judges across the country and other states that do it, one of them being California. And he's a 50-year practicing lawyer, former judge, and said, Mike, he's like, we even have some of that, some of the voting stuff here in California. And he's like, what you're doing, the Missouri plans, he didn't agree with it. And of course, you get your different opinions, but he's like, you can do better. And he's like, what the Missouri plan essentially does do is it takes away the voice of the people. And that's not the right way to do it.
No,
That's why
not.
I think we can do better.
Yeah. And you mentioned Constitution. I mean, I'm seeing people that are politicians are swearing to uphold the Constitution, and then they're walking all over our constitutional rights. It's scary.
Most of them don't even know what it is, I think. I'm not sure they read it.
I think you're absolutely right, which is scary. And now they're politicians that are, voting for us or making a change for us, which against the Constitution. I know we've got red flag bills on the floor right now. I'm not for that in any way. It's in violation of our Second Amendment rights. So,
and that's not the only one, Donna. That's a whole another area we're working on with another high-powered lawyer from lower 48 on states' rights, because it's not just the Second Amendment, but that's certainly a part of it. You have the voting stuff they're looking at the federal level that would completely redefine how we vote, and it would be lined up with that other bill in the House here right now. It's very similar to that. So this overreach of going into states and telling people, and this is my biggest problem. I love federal, like we have federalism, right? We have different states around the nation, and what works in New York doesn't work in Florida, doesn't work in Texas, doesn't work in California, doesn't work in Alaska. And the beautiful thing about it is, we have this federation where these states retain all those rights that were not specifically given to the federal government. And yet we've gone down this path of federal supremacy where the federal government goes, we are in charge of everything, and we're going to tell you how to do it and pound that square peg in a round hole, because what works in DC or what people think there doesn't work in Alaska.
It's
especially
scary.
when you go things like Second Amendment rights and other stuff. We don't want you to tell, guns are a big deal to us. It's a way of life. So federal overreach and supremacy is very scary to me, because it starts to have that we're better and smarter than you here in DC, and we're going to tell everybody how you're going to do things. And states should be fighting back on that.
Well, absolutely. And I think what the politicians are missing is right now, just teaching our classes, we have more men and women who've never touched a gun, taken our classes. And when we ask, why are you here? One, they're learning to protect their family, and they're concerned about our government and the government overreach. These are people who've never touched guns, who are afraid to touch guns, and they're concerned with what's happening in the community right now. So, and this whole defund the police thing is not a good thing as well. So
we've got bills here as well, which I've seen some in the state that kind of go down that path. We have the red flag laws and other things. You've seen some taken away. I think it might have been, that was Guarantar. She files that every year. I think Adam Wool has one now, and a Republican, no less, Thompson out of Fairbanks, because they're both out of Fairbanks, about, you can't leave a gun unlocked in your house. Because if something happens, then, you can be the one, charged with a crime. Because a lot of people have, quick access, they'll have like I have them at home, you have magnets where you might put stuff up if you're walking around during the day or whatever. And so every little thing, and they go, well, that's all it is. It's, it's the standard thing, right? It's an emotional, it's for the children. That's what they always say with things, to bring you around emotionally, because somebody somewhere, there was an accident. Because somebody did something that maybe they left their gun sitting right there where, a grandkid could go around, pull, play with it or something. And that's just dumb. Right. But do you affect everybody else because somebody did something stupid and a child was injured, and you go, oh my gosh, it's for the children. Well, you don't usurp everybody else's rights because somebody didn't do it right. That's not how it works. Right. Absolutely. You don't do that. You protect everybody's rights, and if somebody needs to be punished, you punish the person that did it wrong. You don't say everybody else can't do it.
Yeah. We just got to educate more. I completely agree with you. I see this movement. It's called 8 Can't Wait. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes,
8 Can't Wait. That's been pushed with Anchorage. It's now on the floor in Juneau, and trying to do some laws against our law enforcement officers. And really, our law enforcement in Alaska, we're top notch. I'm just going to say we are. I work with the sheriff's department, completely different. You come up to Alaska, it's a higher standard. We love the community. We're shorthanded law enforcement, and the community's been good to us. And now we've got people in Juneau who are trying to make it more difficult. So it's pretty frustrating, but I'm going to stand with my brothers and sisters. We got some good officers.
I think you'll find right now, Donna, there's not a lot of support for most of that here. Alaska is a little different. We don't have the statistics that bear out what's happening in the lower 48. It's a social justice kind of a movement that is trying to pretend that Alaska is just like the lower 48. And the reality is we're not. Most people in Alaska are from somewhere else. We are a big melting pot, especially in Anchorage, of people from all races, all different. I mean, there's so many, from Asia and from the Pacific Islands in Anchorage that you just don't even think about.
We're a great mix. That's great. Yeah, we're a great mix.
Correct.
Born and raised here.
And you talked about the Alaska Police Standards Council. I saw you debating that, on Facebook with somebody, and they are very good at going through that. And we don't have the statistics, and people are trying to say stuff. Well, we have the highest this. No, we don't. Look at what happens here and how often somebody's shot by a police officer, and how Many people have had their own, their certifications yanked from them by the council because they didn't follow the appropriate protocols. We're good at policing ourselves, from what I've seen up here, and we don't have the kind of problems in the lower 48. So this is just part of a movement nationwide to basically bring a little more anarchy and to, basically erode the thin blue line. And unfortunately, I don't think people understand how dangerous that is. And I don't support it, and I'm not gonna.
Yeah, and I think Alaskans are pretty good. I'm seeing a lot of people going out back to blue, doing some rallies just for law enforcement, which means a lot to us. And I think Alaskans are going to say, no, we're not going to defund the police. That's just craziness already. But in the meantime, we have more people buying guns, trying to get ammo, which is very difficult to buy now anywhere in the U.S. It's crazy.
Yes,
but
it is.
I'm going to wrap it up. Here's my question to you. There's so many new people that will probably watch this. They are, like I said, they're new gun owners. They're now just getting into politics. They want to make a difference. Where do they go? How do they get involved? What would you recommend?
People ask us all the time. Let's take about a minute, but I'll do my best to speak fast because I always do anyways. Kind of like you. We both speak pretty fast. So, one thing you have to do, in my opinion, is you have to be involved with your legislators, whether they be state level, federal, you never see them, and that's kind of a whole nother animal, but state level to your local, your city council, your Matsu borough, even your like Palmer, for example, up in the valley, the Palmer City Council, Wasilla City Council. All politics are local, as some people will say that have been in the business a long time. We have to get people involved, and that means you show up at meetings and you complain. And when you have, remember, we had like this mask mandate over in Palmer. Hundreds of people showed up and complained about it, and it shut it down, and they didn't pass the policy. So you can absolutely make a difference when the people get involved. When you don't get involved, they'll do whatever they want, and they say, well, we can do what we want because people don't get involved. So first of all, you got to be involved at your local level and the state level. You need to write, call, email your legislators and your council members as much as you can, because it does matter when they start to see hundreds of people calling in angry about something. The number one thing most politicians care about is keeping that seat. That's what matters to them, right? So they want to hold on to that seat of power for prestige, the name, their own agenda, whatever it is, but they want that seat. And if they feel like they're going to be in danger of losing it, they'll change their vote. They'll change their stance. They will, because they don't want to lose that seat. If they see a mass of people going the other direction from what they were doing, and they'll be nervous about that, and you can actually influence them. The other thing I would tell people is we do a terrible job of finding, vetting, and supporting good candidates for office. We can't just let things go and complain when something happens, affects us in the wallet. And until then, we're just silent, don't say anything. Then we get all mad for a little bit, and then we forget about it and go on. Politicians know that, Donna. They know that they can get away with stuff because people only get mad for a little while and forget about it. I hear them say that all the time. I've heard a legislator here in Juneau tell me that when they got elected and voted the exact opposite of what they said in their campaign, they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I got 3 years to apologize for the people. They'll forget. That's how they think. And the final thing for those that are really interested or have the ability to do it, kind of like I stepped in and I don't really like it and whatever, but is if you feel compelled to, you should step up and do something. It doesn't mean you have to go spend time at the state level, or even you can be a school board member. Run for your city council, run for the Matsu Borough Assembly, run for, get on your community council that don't meet very often. These things affect us by local ordinances and taxes that are passed and policies. So I know that was longer than a minute, sorry, but just get involved. Go speak, be vocal, bind with other people, find good candidates and support them, walk neighborhoods for them, make phone calls during campaigns, run yourself for something small that doesn't take up much time. If enough of us would wake up and get involved, Donna, half the country is that silent majority that's been quiet and is starting to wake up. We're not awake enough yet. And we're seeing things take place that are making people wake up, but darn it, people need to get involved. And I know that's a couple minutes, but that's a lot of what we do.
I'm with you. I have no desire to get involved or let alone do a podcast because it took me forever to even figure out how to start this. Like I said, it's my first episode, but I talked to a couple of the youth, and a lot of them, they don't want to read anything. They preferred podcasts. And this is why I put this podcast together, to get this out and hopefully educate the people in our community, quickly listen to it and know what's going on in the community, how to make a difference. So with that, if people want to ask some questions, would you mind coming back again in the future? If I can.
Anytime, Donna. Love it.
Okay.
You know that. Be happy to come back. Give us the topics, and you and I can rap for 15, 30 minutes.
I know. We got to stay on a topic because we can just go everywhere, you and I. So.
Yes, we could.
All right. So if you guys are listening to this and you want to learn more or you have questions, go to pointblankak.com.